Good morning, everybody. It's now 8:30, so we will kick off this varieties webinar for the Western region. Just a few words on housekeeping. First of all, the webinar will be recorded and it will be available online after the event. So just please bear that in mind. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, which will run until 9 o'clock, then please use the Q&A function, not the chat function, and I will collate those questions and we'll deal with them all at the very end. And basis and Enroso points will be available. That information will be sent to you in an email following the webinar, along with a survey. And this webinar format is clearly going to be with us for some time, and so we want to make it the best it can be. So please do give your feedback so we can continue to improve. As far as the agenda goes, my name is Duncan Woodward. I work in the Southwest for Syngenta as a business manager. I will give a very, very brief introduction and then I'll hand over to the technical experts. Paul Roche will cover hybrid barley varieties for the West and their benefits. Matthew Bull will cover hard feed wheat varieties for the West, winter wheat, and then Catherine Hamelin will cover malting barley options for the West. And as I said, we'll finish off just before 9 o'clock with answering what questions come up. So a quick kickoff for an introduction. So weather, of course, when we're contemplating varieties for autumn sowing, we can spend all day talking about the weather, and I suppose it suffices to say that this growing season has had its own unique peculiarities and has presented challenges to both the development of crops and crop management inputs. It's different than last year. It is different than what will come next year. So how do you choose a variety to cope with that unpredictability? And for me, it's really choosing a variety that has some resilience to whatever the season will throw at it. You need a variety that will cope with adverse conditions and still deliver a solid performance, but has within its genetics the potential to deliver an outstanding performance if the conditions are conducive. So yield remains obviously a very big driver and reliability of that yield. You always need to make sure that you understand the end market, and I guess that's particularly relevant for when Catherine speaks about winter malting barley, but it's true of any crop. You need to understand the requirements of the end market and aim to hit that end market and maximize your output. And of course, disease susceptibility is one of the key considerations of variety choice. And if I focus particularly on wheat, then septoria is the main focus for the Western region. So choosing a variety with the right level of resistance is a starting point. The chemistry that we have available to control septoria is robust, and we have more coming, but it comes at a cost. And so the foundation of your disease management program is, of course, variety choice. And I'll just finish off by mentioning yellow rust, which is not something we would necessarily focus on in the West historically, but it is a disease that I don't think has been managed to people's satisfaction this year, even in the West. So as I say, the chemical armory that's available has shifted. It's not quite so varied and comprehensive for yellow rust control as it was. And so understanding variety susceptibility, understanding this disease, which has the potential to rob yield at an alarming rate of knots, is an important part of your variety choice. So with that, I will hand over to Paul Roche to discuss hybrid barley. And just a final reminder that the Q&A function is what you need to use rather than the chat function to ask questions. So over to Paul.
Well, thank you very much, Duncan. I'm Paul Roche, Cease Technical Manager for the hybrid barley portfolio, and just want to take you through the main benefits of hybrid barley and my top picks for the west of the country. And If you think about the healthy habits of successful hybrid barley growers, the 6 of them, and choosing the right variety is absolutely the first step to success. And of course, when you look at the recommended list, you can see there's a wide choice of varieties available out there. But it's not about picking any variety, it's about picking the right variety for yourself. So hopefully we can drill down into some of those considerations. Really the starting place for choosing a hybrid really is high yield, consistent yield, but there's much more. But if we look at yield to start with, we can see for each and every single one of the last 7 years, the hybrids have topped every single region. And that is an unrivaled track record of performance. And then, of course, when we did the cashback yield guarantee, you could see that when you grew these varieties at a farm scale, tailored the agronomics to the varieties themselves and harvested them at the correct time, then the benefit of the hybrid variety was even bigger than the number on the recommended list. So high yield, consistent yield is the foundation, but they offer so much more. And really, when we think about the main additional benefits, they fit into reliability and security on one hand and flexibility on the other. Grass weed suppression, we've now shown that these varieties are competitive against blackgrass, bromegrass, ryegrass too, and they're a strong alternative to second wheat. So if you've got grass weeds on your farm and you're forced to make an early start, then these varieties give you an option to start early. But of course, there's no T3 ear sprays, there's no orange wheat blossom mid sprays, and you've got more simplicity and less cost with your herbicides because there's no ALS chemistry. Early harvest gives you an opportunity to spread workload at harvest and avoid overlap with the winter wheat harvest. And of course, early grain in the barn can create early cash flow and help to pay some of those bills. But more than that, if you're choosing to grow winter oilseed rape, then you can get the seeds in early, get them into moisture, get them up and away before the first migration of cabbage stem flea beetle. And then if we think about the specific weight, we'll look at this in a little bit more detail, but these varieties give you the confidence that you're going to exceed the specification in the contract. With the current straw prices, there's a lot of healthy additional income to come from straw, and the varieties have a good flexible disease profile, good disease resistance, which might help you to just have some flexibility on your spray timings. And of course, behind all this, you've got dependable performance, which reduces the risk and makes sure you get the yield that you're expecting. And then, so we said that 6-row varieties and the hybrids as well have had a bad rap for specific weight, but we've been really working hard on this and made some considerable progress. The green line shows the average of all the hybrids on the recommended list for the last 18 years. And you can see there's been a huge progression there. They're now equivalent to 2-row varieties shown in orange. But of course, we don't buy averages, we buy varieties. And when you look at the varieties here, you see each and every single one of them individually is well placed in the upper 75% of the distribution for specific weight. So my 4 top choices for this region are Kingsbarn, Thunderbolt, Kingston and Belfry. I'm going to go into them in just a little bit more detail one by one. Starting with Kingsbarn, barely needs any introduction. This variety is the market-leading hybrid variety and a really popular choice out there. And arguably that's based on the winning combination of high yield, high specific weight and good all-round agronomics, both good disease and good for lodging. And you get the grass weed suppression too. So it's an easy to grow variety with a nice profile. And we can see that here where we plot treated yield with specific weight, varieties with high yield and grain quality in the top right corner. And you can see that Kingsbarn has a really well-balanced profile. And more than that, it's been out there on the farm and it's got a proven track record of performance in commercial practice. Thunderbolt, this is a new variety, really good yield in the west and particularly strong on heavy land, and one of the 2 earliest hybrid barley varieties to mature. So if you need to spread that workload, this is one of the choices you can consider. And just to look at the numbers, just as a snapshot, pick the top 6 hybrids on the recommended list in the West. They're all hybrids, and you can see Thunderbolt there, the dark green bar is well placed. And likewise with the heavy soils, you can see that's well placed too. The asterisk indicates that it's based on limited data, but that's 5 sites or so. So we would expect that to hold true in the future. And then just zooming out to the wider adaptability of the product, looking at treated yield across the UK and plotting that against heavy soils, you can see it stands out on its own there on that heavy land. Moving on to Kingston, another great choice for the West, but on light land this time. Most of the hybrids do slightly better on heavy land than light land, but this is one of the exceptions, and it shares that early maturity with SY Thunderbolt. So solid, reliable, year-to-year consistency, and actually the highest yielding variety in trials last year. And likewise, top 6 varieties per function. Here you see it's top variety in the West, and it's the top variety on the recommended list on light soils. It's a strong choice. And again, like we did with Thunderbolt, zooming out for the wider adaptability of the UK treated yield versus light soils, you can see it stands out on its own again. Final choice is Belfry. Many people will be familiar with this variety. It's offering high yield, resilience, and easy to manage agronomics. It's one of the shorter hybrids, really good for lodging resistance, good yields in the West, good yields on heavy land, and really a great choice if you're looking for the most bulletproof hybrid barley variety available. Look no further than Belfry. It's a great choice if you're looking for management flexibility. And then finally, just to say a couple more words about grass weeds. I talk about the troublesome trio. The hybrid barleys don't work so well about wild oats, despite some of the conversations you might have seen in some of the forums. But really, this is to make the point that blackgrass is bad enough, but brome and ryegrass are even worse. So at the same population density, they're more competitive and will reduce yields by even more. And hybrid barley will do all 3 to an extent. But of course, we have to realize it's not the magic bullet, and we need to take an integrated approach and combine different measures together to get the 95% plus control that we need. And of course, if some of those elements are compromised, like you're forced to go earlier than you'd like to and you can't delay drilling, then the value of these competitive hybrid varieties and increased seed rates are even bigger. And if you want to join me for a plot tour around some of the grassbreed trials, just have a look for yourself, then join me on the YouTube channel. And with that, I'll hand over to Matt and take questions at the end.
Thanks, Paul, and good morning, everybody. My name's Matthew Ball, Seeds Technical Expert for winter wheat, and I'm delighted to have a few minutes this morning just to take you through my top selections for the Western region. So my top 3 for this autumn, it feature SY Insitor, Gleam and Graham. 3 high-yielding hard feed wheats, which each have a unique agronomic profile and different growth habits to determine which is the right variety for you. So first on my list is our newest member, SY Insitor, the highest yielding hard feed on the recommended list, which brings outstanding grain quality and robust septoria resistance. So as Duncan mentioned earlier, arguably the most attractive trait for a hard group 4 variety is yield, and SY Insitor certainly doesn't let us down there. SY Insitor remains the highest yielding hard group 4 option on the recommended list, and it's commanded that position for 2 years in a row now. And as you can see, it delivers 104% in the Western region, which makes it a very difficult variety to ignore. SY Insitor is the highest yielding variety on light land, which we believe is linked to its rapid root development. It's performed exceptionally well, both as a first and second wheat. And finally, but importantly in the battle against grass weeds, it's a really strong late drilled option. However, as we know, variety choice is much more than just yield, and SY Insitor has several wider benefits to sort of broaden its appeal and make it a secure option on farm. It brings excellent grain quality, most notably for its specific weight, combined with good Hagberg falling numbers. It's also got robust resistance to Septoria tritici, which is a key factor for variety choice in the West. So it's coming in at 6.8, matching that of Graham. And then finally, it's got orange wheat blossom midge resistance to simplify pest management. So that's a very quick overview of SY Insitor, a top output variety supported by great grain quality and a strong agronomic profile, making it a sound choice for the West. So my second pick is Gleam, the variety that adapts to all soils, all regions, and all seasons. So Gleam can adapt to all scenarios and has rightly become the variety that you can rely on. The chart here on the slide shows Gleam consistently delivers across a vast range of scenarios, delivering 103% of controls for UK yield, Western yield, yield for several individual seasons, first cereal, second cereal, early sown, late sown, and so on. Gleam delivers unrivaled consistency, and as Duncan mentioned earlier, we think this is a really important factor in variety choice. So a bit more on why I think Gleam is a great option for the West. Firstly, as I've already sort of called out, yield consistency, but not just in different farm situations, but across different seasons as well. So we've suffered several consecutive challenging seasons now from a weather perspective, and that I think has really tested variety resilience. And as you can see, Gleam has adapted incredibly well across the different years. And I think that really demonstrates the value of varieties with proven on-farm performance, which deliver year on year and sort of do exactly what they say on the tin. Next up is Gleam's flexibility. So clearly, as I've described, Gleam can suit a vast range of scenarios, but also it has the widest drilling window of the Syngenta varieties. So its growth habit lends it to relatively early drilling, but it's also safe to drill right through to mid-February, giving you that confidence that you'll get it in the ground, whatever the weather throws at us. And then finally, Gleam is a secure option driven by high untreated yields, orange wheat blossom midge resistance like SY Insitor, and good straw characteristics. So Gleam is an extremely versatile variety, which again is a great fit for the West. And finally, but certainly not least, Graham, which is the consistent and secure option, which has been the mainstay in the West for the past few seasons. Graham is the #1 variety on the recommended list in the Western region for yield, and that's why it's my third choice. So Graham remains popular on farm with several years of proven high performance, which is largely driven by an excellent disease profile, good straw characteristics, and excellent consistency across years. He might not be a new variety, but he's certainly difficult to beat in the West, and he continues to provide list-topping performances. So I think something which has gained more traction in the past couple of years with the challenges that we've had around establishment is early drilling. And Graham has all the right characteristics for drilling in that early slot. It has slow and prostrate overwinter development. It's got stiff straw with excellent resistance to lodging. And then it's got really strong resistance to the key primary diseases of yellow rust and septoria. Now, Graham is widely recognized as a low risk option. It's proven on farm, has excellent disease resistance, as I've mentioned, that stiff straw and high untreated yields. It's also the joint earliest maturing variety on the list, which will be of particular interest for growers looking to spread harvest workload. And the relatively tall straw, which brings in excellent resistance to lodging, may well be of additional value to you guys in the West. And the final point on the slide here is that independent data from Rothamsted Research has identified Graham as a low take-all build-up variety. Now, this is important as it directly reduces the amount of take-all inoculum left in the soil post-harvest, and that immediately reduces the risk of take-all in your following cereals. So, as an overall variety, Gleam is a seriously good fit for the West, particularly as a first wheat option. And so just to finish off, really, Syngenta remain committed to bringing varieties through which combine high yield and robust septoria resistance, which make them excellent fits for the West. As you can see, our newest variety, SY Insitor, carries a 6.8 for septoria, which matches that of Graham. So for the best combinations of both yield and septoria resistance, you need look no further. So that's it from me. Thanks for listening. We'll take any questions later, and I'll pass over to you, Catherine.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. Thanks for going through those wheat varieties. And now on to something a little bit different. We'll start talking about the malting barley market. So I've just taken this from a recent publication from the MAGB, which is the Maltsters Association of Great Britain. And what it does is it shows you the purchases from the last 10 years of all the different varieties. So it's quite an interesting graph. And you can see that it's remained fairly consistent, but we did take a big hit in 2020 in terms of the amount of grain that was actually purchased by the maltsters to go into making whiskey and beer. And part of that is driven by the very poor growing season that we had for the winter crop, but also obviously COVID played a huge part in the amount of beer that was made, and also to a lesser extent the amount of whiskey that was made. This obviously had a knock-on effect as maltsters weren't malting as much to replace the beer, and so they didn't purchase as much. The great news from this publication is that they have said that they are planning to purchase around about similar levels to 2019, so back up to 1.8 million tons of barley from 2021 harvest. So that's a really, really good news story for anybody looking to grow malting barley in the future, and also for you guys that got it in the ground this year. It looks like as the COVID restrictions begin to ease, then the market is picking up. So what are they after? Sorry, could you just go back one slide? So the pie chart on the right shows you the grain nitrogens that the maltsters which for harvest 2021, and you can see for southern and eastern England, there's quite a range of bandings and also a range of spring and winter barley that they're after. So spring is still taking the large quantity of the purchases, but also winter barley for England is still becoming more and more important as we go forward. So where do you start when you're looking to choose a variety? Well, the NBC approved list is also really important to check. So this shows you the progression of new varieties and whether they've got provisional full approval. And also for the varieties that are out there, some of them drop off the list every now and then. So it's really important to check this, and then obviously check locally for contracts. But you can see Syngenta has a great track record here. We have a variety for every single major market. So for winter brewing, for spring brewing, malt distilling, and for grain distilling. So a good place to start would be this list, and then you can choose your variety from this point. So we're going to talk about Craft, Electrum, and Laureate today. So Craft and Electrum are our two winter barleys, and Laureate, as many of you will be aware, is the UK's biggest spring malting barley. So if we start with Craft, this is the #1 winter malting barley in the UK. It has completely replaced SY Venture, and it was bred very much to replace and improve on where Venture left us. So it's got great grain quality. One of the issues with Venture was its screenings, and these are much improved with Craft. It's got extremely high market demand from the end users. They love it. Maltsters and brewers really pleased with it and will continue to be so. And for growers, it's a reliable variety to manage. So good grain quality, the best straw of the winter malts, and also very good disease resistance. So it's 6 and above for everything. Then moving on to Electrum. So this is our newest winter barley with NBC approval for brewing. It's the top yielding variety. It's highest yielding, the top yielding winter malting variety. It's the highest yielding in the West as well. And it's been very consistent. It continuously out yields the other varieties in all regions. The nice thing about this variety is it's quite different from Craft in terms of its growth habit. So it's a good partner for Craft. It's got early maturity and a very vigorous growth habit over the autumn. So it's it grows very quickly. It will be the first to reach all of the major application timings, and that ends up being one of the earliest maturing varieties, equaling the earliest of the hybrid barleys. It's got full approval for brewing, and it is increasing in popularity with the end users. So if you're looking for this one, check locally for contracts, and there should be some in your area. So if we just move on in the interest of time and move on to Laureate next. Laureate's is spring barley, the UK's most popular spring malting barley. It's got full approval for both brewing and malt distilling. And so it has multiple market options. And as you remember from the pie chart that I showed you earlier, this is really, really key because actually maltsters are looking to Laureate for different end use. So they'll take both high and low nitrogen contracts for this variety. A very consistent variety, very reliable to manage again, good grain quality. It's got good disease resistance with a 6 rating for Rinco, and actually it's remained one of the highest varieties for untreated yield, even though it's been on the list for a long time. It's very, very popular with end users, and it's very consistent both on farm and through the malting and brewing and distilling processes. So high demand again for this variety, which we see it will continue to do so for the next couple of years. So the last 2 slides are just going through a little bit of nitrogen advice. As this variety is approved for both brewing and malt distilling, you're looking for different nitrogen specs. So for brewing, we're looking for an aim of around about 1.6 to 1.75 up to around about 1.8% grain nitrogen. And what we've seen in trials that increasing nitrogen, total nitrogen applied, does increase yield, but it tailors off towards the end, and actually high nitrogens just end up pushing your grain nitrogen, which could get to a little bit too high for the brewing spec. Moving on to the malt distilling, we've seen a very similar pattern in terms that the increasing total nitrogen that applied does increase yield. But really, when you're getting up to that 150 kilograms, we're looking at very high yields, but also we're getting to the point where you might not make the spec for malt distilling for that low nitrogen, especially if you're coming off the back of quite a low yielding year, then you'll see that they get pushed a little bit further. So just a final point on the new varieties that we've got. So we've got SY Tungsten and SY Splendor. Both of them are spring malting barleys. SY Tungsten has provisional approval for brewing and malt distilling, and Splendor for brewing. So these 2 are still being tested, and they are ones to watch for the future.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Matt. Thank you. Well done for keeping to time. We have got just 2 or 3 minutes, so we'll just cover off a couple of the questions that have come in. If I could start with you, Paul. Just trying to summarize the question. So in terms of drilling date and seed rates for hybrid barleys, agronomy wise, with grass weeds and BYDV, drilling data is important. So could you comment on seed rates and ideal drilling dates for the hybrids, please?
Okay, so the ideal window really is between mid-September and mid-October, and in that area we would expect people to be using between about 200 seeds in standard kind of conditions up to about 250 seeds per meter square in compromised conditions, where the compromise means a lower quality seed bed, or it means a grass weed issue there. As you push towards the end of October, you can still do well with it if the conditions are suitable, and you might be looking at just a few more seeds in there, maybe starting at that kind of 225, 250 upwards, because the conditions are slightly compromised at that time. And then in some seasons, people have successfully drilled into the first couple of weeks of November, but really you've got to be mindful of the basics and stick to the basics. What we're not looking for is seeds in the drill, we're looking for plants established, and you need to do what you need to do to achieve probably between about 160 and 180 plants established per meter square, because mathematics are boring, but they're kind of fundamental, that you've got to get the plants to get the yield.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I'll also perhaps give a plug myself to the BYDV Assist app for any autumn application, any autumn drillings, to use that to help time your insecticide applications. A question for Matt now. Mainly, yeah, just to try and summarize that question, I think it's mainly around use of blends. They are vogue, or increasingly vogue at the moment. And so, yeah, any comments on work that we might have looking at winter wheat blends?
Yeah, it's a great question. And as you say, blends are clearly becoming more and more popular, and you see it all over Twitter and other social media platforms. But we're just starting to look at or to trial blends more extensively this season. So we definitely have a lot to learn ourselves. But I think the important thing to ensure is that the blend is optimized to add value and not have a sort of antagonistic or negative impact by mixing the wrong varieties. What we've seen in our trials this year from a wheat perspective is that some varieties are clearly more competitive than others, and what you harvest will be different proportions of the varieties compared to what you drilled. And talking to some of the seed trade, we see Graham and Gleam being particularly popular in blends. Graham largely chosen for its unique French genetics, disease resistance and straw strength, and then Gleam in there for its unrivaled consistency, giving that blended crop added resilience. So unfortunately, I don't have a huge amount of insight to give. We're looking at it, and it's something we're definitely going to continue to trial in field, and we'll be sharing any results from this year when we get the opportunity.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Matt, and thank you to everybody. It's now 9 o'clock, so we'll draw this webinar to a close. I would like to thank everybody for attending, and particularly thank the speakers for their contributions. As I said at the outset, a recording of this will be made available on the website, and there will be an email to those of you who have attended with your basis and ROSO points notification, and also a link to a survey. So, and please do complete that. So with that, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Goodbye.